So we have need of a study session. The topic is the Denver Regional Council of Governments Regional Housing Needs Assessment and Recommendation of City Participation to meet requirements of SB 24-174. So who's taking this one, Mr. Wick?
Well, it is our housing. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for having us and spending some time with us this afternoon. I'm going to turn it over to Sam Bradley, the city's Affordable Housing Development Specialist. She will take it from here.
All right. Let's get this going. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for listening to me for this presentation. It's a little bit dense, but I'm going to try to simplify it and explain why we're here, why we're doing this, what this is, why we're making this recommendation. So I would just ask for you guys to bear with me. Okay, so the first thing is, do you mind if I just hide this floating? No. Much better. Okay, so the purpose of today's session is we're going to provide council with some information on Senate Bill 24-174 and the new requirements that it brings to our municipality. We're going to recommend a strategy to use a third-party report to help us fill these administrative requirements as one part of complying with this legislation. We are going to provide council with information on this third-party report. We're going to determine if council would like to accept the city's recommendation to use this third-party report. And if council decides to accept this recommendation, we are going to ask council to provide commentary on the report to send to the report's author. So these comments that you make will be recorded and forwarded to the author of the third-party report. We're going to have one slide at the end where we're just going to go around the table and get your official comments, assuming that we decide to participate. So, intro to Senate Bill 24-174. So this was passed on May 30th, 2024. If you recognize that date, it is 10 days after we passed and adopted our strategic housing plan. It imposed new requirements on municipalities in Colorado, and these requirements have a 6-year cycle. So there's two parts to the requirements imposed by this legislation, and we've talked a lot. There's been a lot of clout about the first requirement, but there's also a second component, and it's just the first component is due much sooner and the second component is due later. So the first component is a housing needs assessment. This is due at the end of 2026. It must be approved by DOLA. So we complete a housing needs assessment, we submit it to DOLA, they say you have met all of our requirements, thumbs up. The next part is the housing action plan, which will be specific to Arvada. And that is due at the end of 2028. So we get 2 more years to do that. That must use the previous HNA that was approved by DOLA as an informational source, but it can use additional sources. It's going to be important. So what is the difference between these two documents? Well, the first is a housing needs assessment. They are typically longer in length. For reference, ours is 102 pages. But they are really a statement of facts. They are not meant to make recommendations. They're not meant to prioritize things. It's just looking at raw data, charting it out, identifying trends, and saying what those trends are. Then we have housing action plans. So we called ours a strategic plan. It is much shorter in length. It's 27 pages. And they are usually data-based strategies to do something about or not do something about whatever the HNA says. So the HNA is the raw data, and the action plan or the strategic plan in our case is what do we need to do in light of this information. They can be extremely broad, and they typically need to be adopted, or we're agreeing to these strategies, we're agreeing to these recommendations. So a HAP or housing action plan, think of it more as it declares an intended course of action, whereas an HNA, which is what we're going to be talking about today, is mostly just a statement of facts. So That being said, with this new legislation, what is expected from the city of Arvada? Well, we need to submit a housing needs assessment to DOLA by the end of 2026. And we need to submit a housing action plan to DOLA by the end of 2028. And the housing action plan must cite an approved plan, an approved housing needs assessment as one of its data sources. So here is the problem, and here is our recommended solution. So we were ahead of the game, and we already did a housing needs assessment. We also did a strategic plan. But because we did ours in advance, it was not done to the legislation's exact specifications. And in the next slide, I'm going to go through with you exactly what the state said they were looking for that we didn't have. So if you just bear with me for 1 second. But the recommended resolution, what the city has come up with, what the city team believes, having gone through the DRCOG Regional Housing Needs Assessment. So DRCOG stands for Denver Regional Council of Governments. I'm going to call them DRCOG. They have written a plan that has been already approved by DOLA. It was written with the benefit of DOLA's guidance. And according to the state legislation, we are allowed to participate in the DRCOG plan. Participation basically just means you listen to my presentation, you say you want to participate, you give me a few sentences, your thoughts on DRCOG's plan, I send them to DRCOG, and then we decide via resolution on September 2nd that we are going to participate in DRCOG's plan. I send on the recommendations, and then we're done, essentially. It's pretty simple. And we think the state may have done this because we are not the only municipality in this situation. A lot of people did housing needs assessments and strategic plans, and then the legislation was passed, and a lot of municipalities turned to the state and just said, what gives? We already did this. Are you really saying that we need to do this again? Jefferson County, for example, they're actually bringing this exact recommendation to their board next week and recommending that they participate as well. So this is staff's recommendation, is that we participate. And then when it comes to writing our HAP, our housing action plan, which is really the end product of this whole process, we just use both. We use our Arvada housing needs assessment, which is still really robust and really good. And we just use the DRCOG Regional Housing Needs Assessment to fill in the administrative gaps that the state identified that we didn't have because our plan was not written with state guidance. And what's great is this option is at no cost to the city. We can use it for free. So there is an alternative resolution. We could hire a consultant to bring our data sets forward by 1 to 2 years. Again, our plan was written first, so there was a time frame that the state mandated, and one or two of our data sets uses data that's a little bit older because it was written 2 years prior. And there are just some small components that we would need to add to Arvada's H&A to make it conform. But city staff doesn't believe that this is going to alter our findings significantly, nor will it alter our strategic plan. It's just the housing market doesn't move that fast, and not enough has happened between when we wrote ours and now. It's just, this is sort of a gap filler. But at the end of this all, there is a housing action plan, which is what I really want everyone to think of as the end product of all of this. And regardless of which resolution council chooses, the city will need to write and adopt a housing action plan that is unique to Arvada. So
What happens if we don't?
then we will not be in compliance with the legislation.
And
Well, I cannot say for certain, but would you like to?
Yeah, and Rachel, you are welcome to jump in here, but just late last week, we received guidance from the governor's office about which
grants he's
which
not
grants
gonna
are-
let us
we will not-
participate in.
yeah.
Grants we never got in the first place.
No, actually, some of them we did.
Yeah, we got a couple million in those grants.
Yeah, so my assumption is, and the way that they're looking at kind of compliance generally is they're kind of going through a list, and I believe that we also have to share information with them, but they're basically going to say, with respect to certain laws, whether or not the city is in compliance, if we are working towards compliance or if we are not compliant. So if they deem us not compliant, we will not be eligible to apply for those grants.
And this question for Rachel, is that whole, the governor acting like Trump getting tested in court?
We will be testing it, yes. Right now, it's the subject of a motion pending in our lawsuits against the state.
Right.
And
On the same question, because we're not gonna be complying with other things, are we still not gonna be in compliance? So we're not really gaining anything through this process?
So
Okay.
sitting on the DRCOG board, and they're gonna be asking me about this tomorrow night. So it is really a gap filler. It's an advantage to the city to go ahead and sign on to the DRCOG housing assessment. It doesn't hurt us in any way, shape, or form. It actually helps, as you said, as Sam said, fill in the gaps where, so we don't have to hire a consultant and we don't have to do other things. And it just enhances our program. It's the easy way out so we don't lose out on funding. Sir,
So my response to that would be, it doesn't hurt us. Well, if we are accepting a set of facts that may not be true, it can hurt us. So,
but we're not doing that. If you read through the DRCOG, it does defer to local governments quite often. And our decisions.
I guess, let me back up maybe in just a general thing, this housing needs assessment is an acceptance of these are the facts. And we're gonna say, Dr. Cog, we're accepting your housing needs assessment as our facts. And so if those facts are not correct, you say that doesn't hurt us? I think it clearly could.
I think there's language in there that gives us the leeway of, the as or as prescribed or as defined by the individual city. I can't remember what the exact words are. They're escaping me. But it gives us a wide berth to come to COG with our own information.
And we're using this just to fill in the gaps. And the gaps are few and far between, so we will strongly rely on the Arvada data that we collected a couple of years ago, but use it, and Sam will touch on where these gaps are, and we see them as pretty insignificant.
They're minor, right?
Yeah, it's homelessness and some other areas that we did not define because at the time we were working on a homelessness strategic plan, so we purposefully did not include that and in our findings. So there's gaps like that there, but we will truly focus on the Arvada data.
I'll save comments for the end rather than draw it up now. I mean, I understand that when we get to our housing action plan, we can use this as some of the facts that we use and not necessarily all the facts that. Well,
It's supplemental.
I just have to warn you, my vision or view of this after 12 years sitting here on council, this is how regions bully cities. Is they say, here's the fact for the region, you should accept these. Now that you've accepted these facts, here's the plan for the region, and you're gonna stick out like a sore thumb if you don't agree to it. And I mean, I've sat on the DRCOG board too. I have significant concerns about that group. I mean, that's as much groupthink as I've ever seen in one place, probably in my life. And so I'm not so sure how absolutely truthful their facts are. But again, let me just leave comments to the end. I don't want to derail things. Now I'll stop. You can.
I have a legal question, Rachel. So with this, looking at the sort of larger ecosystem of all the legislation that's come down and our lawsuit against the state over 1313. Does opting in help us in the sense that it shows good faith that, we have these legitimate concerns about this other legislation, but we are still participating, it's not like we've taken our ball and gone home, or does it hurt us because we're willing to accept this, but not that?
I don't think it weighs either way. I'll let Megan, McCall weigh in on this too, because we did take some precautions. Assuming council decides they want to move forward with this, we have considered that in the context of the case and included language in the upcoming resolution, if any, that would address it. So I'll let Megan explain more.
Yeah, absolutely. This piece of legislation is not one of the specific bills that are being challenged in the litigation. And outside counsel, the litigation counsel are all aware that we are considering doing this. In the resolution that will be forthcoming, should you decide to move forward with participation. Yes, exactly like Rachel said, there's some language in there that basically says that Arvada, by adopting the resolution and by participating in the the regional housing needs assessment isn't compromising any of its rights or any of its ability to at a future point in time challenge any constitutionality or applicability of a law to it. So although that language may not be expressly necessary anyway, it does kind of put in some safeguards to say we are taking this action and it doesn't compromise us from taking future action to challenge it.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And before we move on, I just want to address a few points that came up. First, a lot of Dr. Cog's sources are the same sources that we used. A lot of it's like American Community Survey, census data, the State Demographer's Office, things of that nature. So these are pretty large scale reliable, should be reliable sources. If they're not reliable, we have bigger problems. But they are, a lot of them, just the same sources that we're using. The second is we're not adopting the H&A. An H&A isn't really something that can be adopted. I've read this, I've read it, Jessica's read it, Rosalind's read it. There are no recommendations in it. It's simply
Lay of the land.
it's lay of the land. There's no recommendations. So the part that would have recommendations, if it existed, which it currently does not, would be a regional housing action plan. This is not a regional housing action plan. This is just a needs assessment based on macroeconomic and population data. It does not make any recommendations whatsoever. And something that's really cool about it if you want to be Arvada specific, is they do have online tools that you can hone in on just Arvada and it will spit out data for just Arvada. So I thought that was pretty fun. But what is missing from our H&A? Why isn't our H&A good enough? I already touched on this. Our data sets are a little bit older because we wrote it first before the legislation came out. Homelessness. We made the determination, the Arvada team, that homelessness needed to be addressed in a separate plan specifically for homelessness, which is why we did not incorporate it in our housing strategic plan or our housing needs assessment. We also didn't really do that forward projection thing that Dr. Cog did. We really honed in on what we thought was needed today. Water supply, that was determined to be out of scope. We believe that to be more of a comprehensive plan item than a housing needs item. And displacement risk, displacement is something that housing practitioners have been working for a really long time to try to figure out how to assess and how to address. So we figured that was going to be something that needed more attention than we could feasibly do in our H&A. But because we didn't have those components, we had things that we decided were actually more important to Arvada, which is an extremely robust resident survey. We also took a survey of Arvada's workers, including in-commuters, so we really got those business voices. We had a really granular breakdown of inventory and location, and we were able to cross-reference that with jobs in Arvada and Arvada employers. So that's something we did that Dr. Cog just wasn't able to get into. So there are reasons why we left some of those things out. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is take you through some of the assessment findings. Dr. Cog, sent us some slides that we could use. And we're going to ask council to consider two things while we go through this. First is, will we participate? Again, participate, not adopt. Participating is simply, we are submitting comments. We are telling DOLA that we read the plan and we submitted comments to the plan. And the first part of our obligations under that legislation is complete. And the second part is, if we decide to go this route, what comments would council like staff to submit to Dr. Cog on their behalf? So at the end of this presentation, I'm just gonna sort of go around and get everyone's official comments. We are not voting to pass a resolution to decide to participate in this until September 2nd. So if you have additional comments that pop into your head, you can feel free to email them to the city team and we can sort of include them as something to compile. We are sending nothing to Dr. Cog until a final decision is made. So the slides are provided by Dr. Cog, and this is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. So Regional Housing Needs Assessment, their intro is that this is supposed to be shared, data-driven, and just sort of get the scale and scope of housing needs across the region now and into the future. They make the argument that there is a need for regional coordination, which, you know, our housing needs assessment certainly aligns with when we found exactly how many in-commuters we have in the city. But their argument is that people cross municipal lines all the time for jobs and housing affordability and school and amenities. So really, an integrated strategy might end up being a really valuable and useful solution for us. So we lost a circle, but we are actually spread across 3 of their regions. If you can't see it, we're also in the West region. I guess this is due to the shape of Arvada. So that's sort of where we are, but you can see some of the other cities that they included. These are what we call them sister cities. They are also in our own housing needs assessment. We looked at a lot of the data for these cities to cross compare to Arvada. So we're certainly in the right neighborhood. And what are some of the key findings of this needs assessment and how do they compare to ours? So they had 4 key findings. The first is that the region has not produced enough housing to keep pace with population and growth. What I thought was really interesting is that when you really drill down to Arvada, you see that Arvada actually has kept pace with job growth for the city in terms of housing built, but only because only 18% of, 82% of workers in Arvada commute in. And something like 62% of Arvada residents commute out. So the people who live here are not necessarily the people who work here. So that's why it might seem like we're actually keeping pace. It's because it's 2 different populations. So I thought that would be maybe an interesting comment to send to Dr. Cog if anyone wants to. But low-income households below 50% area median income obviously have the highest need. We found this as well in our housing needs assessment. Aging population and smaller household size means that we're gonna need more diverse housing types. A lot of seniors are looking to downsize, and in Arvada, there are a few places to do so. And housing types and affordability are unevenly distributed across the region. We also found that they are unevenly distributed across Arvada. We are heavily slanted towards single-family homes, and apartments and affordable homes tend to be geographically clustered even within the city itself. So yes.
Let's ask you, if you're finished with that statement, I just want to ask you a question on what you just said. You just said Arvada residents are aging and seeking to downsize, but they don't have options.
That is what, so our survey revealed to a split. Either they're looking to age in place, but they're not sure if they can stay in their homes because of ADA issues. Or they are looking to downsize for affordability and there's nowhere for them to go. So that's, we saw a split
Within the city.
I think when you state that like that, you need to qualify that the way you just qualified that in your answer. Because if you just say that Arvada's population demographics are aging and they want to downsize, but they can't. Well, every affluent Arvadan who is aging and would like to downsize either can, or they will create a market that will provide opportunities for them. I think that's very different than somebody who is needing to downsize economically. And it yields two totally different things, but you've got them all just in one blanket statement there. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff I worry about, is because I guarantee you, if we had, you know, we're an older community, we've got a significant number of people who are aging. We're also very affluent. We have a significant number of people who are affluent and aging. And if they really want to downsize, they will create a market for that. That market doesn't seem to exist so much because there's not much of that being built right now. Maybe there's stuff in the pipeline in the plan. There's some, a little bit. But I think those types of assumptions that aren't supported by market action is what keeps me awake with this kind of stuff, with accepting data as, well, that makes sense, so that must be the truth. But the data actually doesn't show that.
Karen.
Well, I know that if I could move into a ranch style home that didn't have steps where my washer and dryer were on the same floor, I would move. There's no product like that for me in Arvada to move to. I would have to move to Erie or Firestone. So you are absolutely right. There are homes that are housing that's available for that. That's being built outside of Arvada. So I have neighbors, one who's 100 and one who's 93. She just had her birthday. And yes, they are affluent. They could move. They want to live in Arvada and they can't find a place to live in Arvada for active age-targeted housing. So it's just not being built in Arvada. We're building Candelas.
So let me answer that for you, and I'll just give you an anecdotal example. At 69th, 70th and Kipling, there's a development there that we've seen several different times proposed. That's a mixture of things, including townhomes and all kinds of stuff. That's currently sitting, not being built. And it's not being built because the market for those things is very soft right now, and all the stuff that's built can't be sold and is selling very cheaply and all that. I guarantee you that developer would build exactly what you're asking for if enough people were asking for that, and at a price point that could make money. The land is there, the approvals are there, the market's not there. And so I get yeah, sure, I'd love to, you know, get rid of my steps and live somewhere else. But there's not enough of you, and there's not enough of you with your wallet out saying, yes, I will, and here's how, and here's
How
how I
much is
will.
that product gonna be? Because if I'm moving out of my house that I can only get $500,000 for and move into something that's $700,000, ain't gonna do it.
So that stuff, I don't know, because that stuff is unbuilt, and it's not. Currently, the last plans we saw weren't aimed at that. What I'm telling you is the reason the plans weren't aimed at that is because there's no market there. Or there's no practical market there. If you
I
take,
think that's the
if-
better
if-
word,
if
the
you- if you
practical
take-
market.
Profitable market.
I'm a perfect example. I own a dozen 1950s ranch houses, very small, by today's standards would be called tiny homes, that people who in my neighborhood who own the same homes would love to have a brand new home for the same price with all the features and everything on one level. But you know what? I wish I were taller too. You know, you can wish for things that aren't possible all day long, doesn't mean it's gonna happen. New construction is brutally expensive.
Exactly.
And so there is no such thing as just, we're gonna wish hard enough, or we're gonna direct hard enough to make something that can't happen. And that's the kind of stuff I worry about in these kinds of things.
I wouldn't confuse the lack of activity with lack of demand, because what the reality is, they may not simply be able to build that stuff as profitably as they want it to be.
Or at
So
all.
it's the profit motive that's driving it, not their desire to simply get product out.
But that's how housing is built.
Of course.
Yeah,
course it is.
but I think that statement, Arvada's inventory is heavily slanted towards single-family homes, is spot on, because.
Well, that's true.
You
That's
know,
statistics.
That's
Yeah,
just numbers.
but I do think that, if somebody were to come in and build age-targeted housing, and even if they sold it for $600,000, I would be willing to move. and open up my house for another family to move into it, but it seems that, I do know a couple of developers that are thinking about doing that here in Arvada. It's just the price of materials and labor is so high that it does not make it cost effective. So you would be moving from California or some other place to live in these age targeted communities that are gonna be absolutely beautiful and have a lot of pickleball and whatnot. And that is extremely, I would love to live in a place like that, but if I wanted to do that, I'd have to move to Erie, Firestone, Loveland, because they are building those products there. Why are those municipalities able to attract that kind of a builder, but Arvada is not?
Land is cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
Development process is easier, development process is cheaper,
Right.
land, all kinds of things.
But they also commute. All those people
Well,
commute.
you don't
I
have
know a
to-
lot of people live in Firestone, have to drive all the way to Golden. I mean, they're
Right.
commuting.
But they're not my age, they're retired.
There are some 50+ being considered on.
Targeted.
So I guess the one thing, I just getting back to this, I don't disagree with what Dr. Cog is saying. They're just saying we have to have more diverse housing types to meet the needs
That's
of a
just a
variety of
statement, it
ages.
doesn't, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
it's not being judgy.
I would say the argument here I'm hearing is cost of material. So if we flood the market with supply, the cost doesn't change. People have to sell it below their costs.
Mhm.
Seriously, I mean, we can flood the market all day long with a whole crop load of, I'd like to know the demographics of Arvada and Jefferson counties. I thought it was going down. So to me, it's interesting that we talk at this regional state level, but yet flooding the market is telling basically developers, well, you're gonna have to take it in the short to
shorts.
sell it because supply and demand won't balance.
And just to, again, clarify, Dr. Cock does not make the recommendation that we should be flooding the market with senior
Right.
homes.
They're
They're
making a
simply
statement.
saying it is a statement that there is an aging population, they have a smaller household size, and some members of that population. And, I think 65, 75 is very different, today than it was 30, 40 years ago. People who are staying in their homes but really shouldn't be for, say, ADA reasons, that's more like 85
Yeah.
demographic, 85, 95,
100.
I've got
100.
those on my street.
Yeah.
I've
So,
got a lot in my
so
neighborhood.
for the ADA purposes, I would think we classify seniors as 55+, which is a little crazy. But really, when we're thinking, ADA, so we're thinking smaller lot size homes, ranch style homes. We're thinking,
Somebody's
we
doing
just
my
built a senior targeted affordable apartments. They can take an elevator. If something happens, they can call the front desk because they're 80, 90 years old. So, living in a 2-story, 4-bedroom with the laundry in the basement, for a 70-year-old, that might be fine. But for, once you get to 90, probably, I don't know, maybe no stairs. So that's sort of what that breakdown is. And I'm giving you very high level. If you would like, I can provide everyone with the link to all the documents. If
Already have
it makes great, I joke that it makes great bedtime reading. It's pretty dense, but it is interesting. And they do dig a little deeper into it, but we only have an hour or so. So yeah, this was sort of the summary of the findings. As I said, they kind of match what we knew anyway, except for that first one, and only because we were able to add more nuance and color to Arvada's particular situation. So this is where using both plans is really going to come in handy when we move into writing our housing action plan, which we have to do anyway, to comply with legislation. So what are some of their findings? They're pretty big, wide. The Denver region, so that's all those cities that you saw in all of those colors. In 10 years, they're thinking about 223,000 new homes. By 2050, 500,000 new homes. This is just a projection based on historic trends. It does not say that we are obligated to build them. Next is what the distribution of this need is going to be in the 10 years. So what income brackets do they think are going to need how many units? Again, this is just based on historical data projected forward. It is not a comment on what we should be doing. Surprise, surprise, the 0 to 50 bracket has the lowest supply in comparison to its demand. That's what that big.
Well, if I was a developer, obviously that's why I'm on.
Exactly.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah,
But why doesn't
yeah.
the state figure out a way to subsidize the 0 to 50 and the
Right.
developer?
So
do
this is
it?
exactly, you just hit it. This is exactly what this is about. Listen to my comments at the end.
All right.
So, yeah, that was.
Exactly what this is.
One of the questions that I had when I was up at CML and for the DRCOG representative on housing, I said, how are we balancing the fact that our residents and voters do not want growth? And then you're saying that we need 200 and some odd homes. I mean, that was a question that I had, and what's that careful balance? They didn't have an answer, but I asked them to please look into it, because that is what, as I was just sharing in a meeting before this, it's all I'm hearing is stop growth.
So I agree with that sentiment, and I just want to reiterate again. This is just a projection based on historical trends. If the goal of the state was to house absolutely everyone, it is just a projection. It is based on trend, and things could change, right? You know, some of this goes out 50, out to 2050. So they say, oh, we need 500,000 homes by 2050. Well, we don't know if we're actually going to need 500,000 homes by 2050. Maybe, I don't know, maybe everyone will decide that instead of moving to Colorado, they want to move to South Dakota. And suddenly we only need 300,000 homes. I mean, this is literally just based on historical projections, which is why they don't make any recommendations. Just because we're just showing what we would need if we were to attempt to house everyone. We're not saying that we should house everyone. And I say we, I didn't write this. It's not saying that we should house everyone. It's not saying that we have to do this. It is not a commitment. It is simply, this is what happened. We took a percentage, we took the growth percentage and we applied it to the future, and this is the number we came up with.
Which years does the aggregate that they took the percentage from cover? Because obviously we saw an explosion of growth in the early teens. That was a little bit outside the norm for the metro region.
So the oldest data that they're supposed to use is from 2022.
Yeah. It's like
Okay, so
20,
it's
23.
recent data.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
so this is just, and if you can see in a lot of the higher income brackets, you probably don't need nearly as much growth. So really just, I think that what this graph is trying to say is that in a lot of these higher income brackets, we're kind of covered. But it's the lower income brackets that have currently the highest need regionally. But again, this is not a recommendation. This is simply charts expanded into the future. All right. So why do they even bother doing this? It's just to understand scope and scale. And even they say, we don't focus too hard on the numbers, look more at the trends when you're thinking about how you want to meet your individual city's needs. So one of the tools that they have that I thought was cool that I wanted to share with all of you is that there is a way to sort out a lot of the regional data, and they can sort of project out, what it looks like for just Arvada. So this is just Arvada data. It aligns pretty well with what we have seen in our housing needs assessment. That big block right there, that's our single family home block. So again, we're really heavily slanted in that direction. Let's keep going. This is the local 10-year need by income. These are households and who is going to need what over the course of the next 10 years. And we see that we need, over the next 10 years, we're looking at roughly 5,000 units for just Arvada. And we're looking at, again, 3,000 of those units are in that 0 to 50 block. And again, just trends, just based on historical data projected outwards. They took a look at what our burden on renters is. So we see that, in 2022, 48% of our renters are considered cost burdened. And a lot of them are what's called severely cost burdened. That means half of your paycheck is going towards your rent. So, that's a pretty tough statistic. And then they also cross-reference, not as deeply as we did, but, jobs by earnings. And this is where you can kind of see that our growth from 2022 projected out to 2050 for households and jobs, they look really, really similar. And I think that is because historically, our local jobs are being filled by in-commuters and our residents are commuting out to go to work, just based on our numbers. And then current jobs by earnings. I kind of disagreed with this chart. That's like one of my comments, that their highest income bracket was about $3,000 a month, which that's pretty low. So I don't know why they didn't go higher, especially considering that Arvada is a more affluent community. But it's just something that they had in there. This is more of a methodology. What criteria are they using to determine our housing need and how they're weighting it? And then we go on to what our 10-year need is by income level. Renters will need the majority of the renter units. Below 50% is projected to need most of the rental units. And interestingly enough, the under 50 and over 120 crowd for homeowner is almost the same. So I thought that was a really interesting statistic. And again, this is just based on the data that they've seen, who's moving here. So I think this is a place, this would be, I would assume, like a pretty confusing chart to somebody who is just looking at a regional plan. But fortunately, we have our own plan to add color to this and really drill down into, okay, what does this mean? Does this mean more single family market rate units? And if that's true, how do we encourage that? And then go on. And of course, how does this intersect with land use development code and the new legislation? So I conferred with the planners and we kind of didn't think it did. There is only one section in the entire DRCOG report it's an appendix, Appendix D, which is land use development code. On-site parking is identified as a development barrier. However, we also identified it as a development barrier in the strategic plan that we adopted. And this is a needs assessment. So this does not make a recommendation for how to mitigate or resolve, or if this even should be resolved. In our strategic plan, which we adopted, that was one of the recommendations, was to offer reduced parking requirements. So if we look at parking, we actually went way further than this document did. And then ADU, DRCOG doesn't seem that interested in ADUs. We didn't really see much about ADUs in the entire document. So our conclusion is the DRCOG regional, the RHNA, we do not believe it makes any real recommendations. We do believe that there is really significant overlap between our HNA and the DRCOG HNA, but the DRCOG HNA was written with the benefit of state guidance, and they also were able to kick it back to the state who reviewed it. The state gave them comments, their comments say, fix this, fix this, fix this. And then they were able to submit it back to the state and they got it approved by the state. And now they're asking if local municipalities would like to participate to fulfill this legislative requirement. And I really need to stress this, participating does not mean consensus with the findings. Does not mean consensus, and it does not obligate us to do anything at all. We have already found little spaces, which I have identified to you guys, about what wouldn't necessarily pertain to Arvada, because we do have our own housing needs assessment. And that's just sort of, but because they're regional, they weren't able to capture it. But again, it's not consensus. We're not agreeing. We're not saying we're taking any actions. We have to write our own housing action plan. That needs to be adopted, not this. This is just participation in a needs assessment saying we're going to use it as a data source for the final product.
Question.
Sure.
You just said we have to write our own. We've done that and we've adopted, it,
The
correct?
strategic plan.
That
Yes.
doesn't count?
That was right at the beginning.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
So can we just re-adopt it and call it something different?
No, we have to adopt a new one by 2028.
Yeah.
So we can use this data. This is kind of
Right.
this is like a supplement to our existing housing needs assessment. This data can be useful as we create our housing action plan that we will submit by 2028.
The new legislation requires us to adopt a new plan every 6 years. So it'll be an ongoing process.
But we don't have to do one right away. We can wait
No.
until ours is done in 6 years. Is that what it is?
By 2028, we have to adopt a new one.
So we're kind of coming in at a strange time, but after that, the cadence will be every 6 years.
So the whole reason we're doing this, because I know you missed the original slides, is a lot of municipalities did their own housing needs assessments and strategic plans. And then the city released its guidance, or not the city, the state released its guidance. And
Game.
we were just ahead of the game, and the state released its guidance 10 days after we accepted our strategic plan. So that was fun. But basically, what we're doing is the state, it has kind of like, it's a little bit of a gift, right? We acknowledge that all of these municipalities have already done this work. They've paid money, they've poured time and effort and staff time, and we've given council many presentations, and this was already done. And now we're coming in, and some of these plans that we did, our plan, we left out some things that we thought we wanted to tackle in our comprehensive plan. We wanted our own plan for. So we would have to go back, hire a consultant. We'd also have to bring a couple data sets forward because our plan was written earlier than when this guidance came out. And just make some minor administrative adjustments to our housing needs assessments, but it would suck up time, and we don't believe it's going to change the findings. So it's kind of, the housing market doesn't move that fast. Population demographics don't shift that fast. So bringing a data set forward 2 years is not going to drastically change anything. So that's why we're recommending that we just sort of accept the gift and, use this. We write our own housing action plan, and then, just move forward.
And we can use the existing strategic plan to heavily influence the action plan if we're still in agreement with what those strategies are.
Yeah, we absolutely can. This is just, the state just wants to make sure that we hit their little checklist. And by submitting comments on this plan to DrCog, who is the author of the plan, we demonstrate that we talked about it. This is technically DrCog's public comment period. It's a little funky because in this particular scenario, you are all the public. Municipal councils are the public. So we just submit your public comment to DrCog, and we tell DOLA we did it. And then we do not owe them anything until the end of 2028. But we can do it sooner if we want.
So knowing that we only have about 10 minutes, and I want to make sure that every council member has an opportunity to submit comments, I guess. What is the guidance at this point? We know that this is going on September 2nd for the resolution. Is there time between now and then for the council to have a look at all the data, to also submit comments to us in this time? Because I want to make sure that people don't feel rushed. We're happy to take them, but we only have 10 minutes. So I just want to make sure that we have a platform so the council can continue to submit information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we just need to, the two requirements in order to participate is that you review the plan at a public meeting, which you're doing now, and that any comments are submitted to DrCog. So there isn't a requirement that all of your comments have to be made right now. I would like for the purpose, it would be my recommendation, just for the purposes of transparency, that we be able to have comments to attach to the resolution that you'll consider, so that those can be included in the agenda and the meeting packet. So it would be good to have, comments in a expeditious manner, but it certainly doesn't have to be in the next 10 minutes. But yes.
How will, in the submitting of comments, as you just described, how will you treat different comments from different council members that may not be the consensus of council, but it's one individual council member expressing this comment?
So my plan was to collect all of your comments, and if any of you had the same comment, just consolidate it. Unless you really wanted your name attached to that particular comment, I wasn't going to. I was just going to say, this was a this was a comment from council. But if you would like to attach your name to it, I can do that too. It really needs to be just an email. And it is this just tells you how accommodating the state is trying to be, because they recognize that so many of us have already done this work. No comment can be your comment if you would like it to be your.
We will take everyone's comments. Yeah,
You can include both.
Yes.
Everybody.
everybody's included.
So I would suggest you separate them out, maybe by council member, if that's what they want. I will be making some comments. I'm reasonably certain that the majority of council will not agree with my comments, and wouldn't want their names on it. And so, and I don't want them to have their names on something they don't want. I mean, you can pass them around and let people agree or disagree, but I will have some comments that are in direct opposition to other members of council, and I don't think they want to agree to my comments, and I certainly don't want to agree to theirs, so.
Well, just for transparency, and since we do have a little bit of time, do we want to try to do a almost lightning round to get some initial comments thrown out?
That works. We'd like to start, and it is a lightning round, so it's.
Not a monologue.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Mine will be simple.
Sure.
This is an assessment. You said you keep using the word plan. It's an assessment. So I'm not too worried about it, because at the end of the day, it's just investing into their version of what they're doing. DRCOG, I don't, being the former chair of DRCOG, this is just normal data collection that they always do. They always do these kind of things. And in a way, I look at it a little bit different. It might not be transportation related, but they are responsible for the growth boundaries. And this aligns a little bit better when we unify around DRCOG. It just helps us through the legislation and some other things. They're actually shielding us in my eyes in this process. Otherwise, we would all individually be turning things in, and it would just be horrific. It's just easier to deal with the MPO. At the end of the day, the true thing we got to worry about is the action plan. And that's not until 2028. I feel we're putting way too much effort into this. What you're asking us and what you're stressing on us is making us feel like we have to give comment. This is just an assessment, and we can give some input to influence a source that we may reference in a future action plan, a source, not the source.
Yes.
So we don't need to, I think this is a little, I'm not gonna say that,
Overthinking
but
it.
we are overthinking this a lot.
Overthinking
I would go through the motion, go forth, conquer. I don't need comments added to it. Where I'm gonna influence and where the most I would be interested in is in 2028. So
Okay. John, lightning.
So I disagree completely. I think the minute you set the table with the facts, you direct a path to respond to the facts that you've accepted. And I think your slide showed it pretty clear. If you go back a couple slides, there was a statement in there that, it's needs, it's where, and at what price. Okay, well, that's making a big assumption about Arvada. Arvada is a suburban community. It grew up as a suburban community, and I would submit that most of the people who live in Arvada would prefer it stay a suburban community. Certainly, there are people who would like it to be an urban community, and I respect their point of view too, but they are far from the majority. The minute you accept as facts, at what price and where, what this is attempting to do is set in place these facts of how many units are needed and in what price ranges and where, and you're trying to make all these communities that are part of DRCOG homogeneous, and we are far from it. I guarantee you Cherry Hills is not looking at this, seeing how many, units they need to produce for those under the 50% median income. Cherry Hills is a very different community than Commerce City or Golden or Wheat Ridge or any of the above. And I think given that we are all different, I am afraid to accept a table set that is kind of an amalgamation of the region. Denver chooses to be an urban community in a lot of its places. Arvada chooses not to be. I don't think you can use the same housing needs assessment for the two because the goal in the end is very different. So the needs to achieve this goal or the needs to achieve that goal are not the same. And that's the part where I have significant problem with this. My recommendation would be that we do not use this, that we step back and we use our, update our own data to make it customizable for us and that we engage in a public process to do it, because I think the residents of Arvada have something to say about this. And, the problem, the bigger picture I see with this whole DRCOG approach to it is, and this whole state legislation approach is, there's a lot of political ideology buried within these, within the legislation, and DRCOG is willing to jump in to try to make it so. I don't think that's what the residents of Arvada are looking for. I don't think they're looking for less commuting. I don't think they're looking for, for
I'm sure.
a more urban community. I don't think, I think there's all kinds of things that can be positive about any or all of those. But we're not the same, nor do I get the sense that our residents are seeking to be the same as Denver. If you want urban Denver, you can have it. It's just over there. It's like 6 miles away. It's easy. You have it right there. I think the people who move to Arvada, who live in Arvada, I would submit everyone around this table came here because it's a suburban community and at some level want it to stay a suburban community. And if you don't, you have urban options all over the place here without making this an urban option.
Thank you. Brett?
One, I think agreement with the facts and the conclusions isn't nearly as innocent or risk-free as we're talking about. Just in this room, we have a disagreement about actual numbers of the size of our problem. So I'm not sure that that is a risk-free and innocent statement. And so I wanted to take great care in signing on to their conclusions. Because just in those stats that you showed us, I'm not at all sure the conclusions followed. So I want to take care in that. Second is clearly the messaging is all about affordable housing, because there are lots of other ways to slice up housing need. There's characteristics, there's, size, floors, proximity to recreation facilities, lots of ways to slice the apple up. And it's not the case that the only one is about income. But it is clear that that's the driver here. And a little bit to John's comment, I don't think that's necessarily the driver of our particular community. It is a driver, not the driver.
Yeah.
I campaigned on this and I stand by this. We are a part of the metro fabric, whether we like it or not. We can't be standing on Road 72 and driving cattle down it anymore. We are growing and we grew really quickly. So we have to change our view of the city. We want to be suburban, but we are urban suburban, whether we like it or not. And so what we have to do, that we're not being asked to adopt anything. We are being asked to say, hey, we're being asked by staff to say, hey, we need this to fill in some of the gaps so that we can get funding from the state. And whether we like it or not, we do depend on that funding. So I say it's no harm, no foul. Go ahead, move ahead appropriately. And then we'll look for our action plan in 2026 if we don't like the road that Dr. Cog is going down.
I think that what is being presented is a regional scope. And there is value in the regional scope and there's value in the local. And so I think we have to take everything for what it is and recognize that we need to continue on our path of doing our local work and look at what has been provided regionally and say, is this a value to us? Is it not? Where does it fit? How can we use it to our benefit? So I think as long as we're not saying we agree with all the conclusions, we agree with, the plan, that there is not a plan, so we're not agreeing to a plan. So just as clear as we're saying all of those things and saying that we recognize the value of what this instrument is, and it's gonna be a tool, not the tool.
We are agreeing to facts. That
So
may or may not be our.
I concur with Bob.
Assessment, not facts.
It's a tool in the toolbox. We can influence it by providing our data to it so that it doesn't get done to us. We're actually an active participant and we're helping shape the thing. It helps fill in the gaps so that we're compliant. We have our hands full already. We don't need more fights. And in addition, just my singular comment to add would be that as anybody, including folks around this table who has spent time on the doors, we already had many of these conclusions anecdotally. We heard this time and time again, so it's nice to see the numbers sort of back up the general sense I know I at least had in terms of what the housing needs are, where they likely lie. It's nice to see that data start to bear out what we were hearing from our constituents day in and day out, so.
Thank you. That was all I had for today. You will be presented a resolution on the 2nd. We're gonna compile your comments. If you want to take a look at the plan and send additional comments to either me, Jessica, Carrie, anyone you want, we'll make sure that they get in there. I think, Megan, the plan is to attach the comments to the back of the resolution so you can see who has said what, if something is missing. And then on September 2nd, there'll be a vote. Do we participate? Do we not participate? If we vote to participate, I will take those comments, send them to Dr. Cog, and we are done. We owe them nothing until 2028. If not, if we decide not to participate, then we will probably need to start looking for a consultant because the update to our plan is due at the end of 2026.
No.
Sam, can you send us an email?
Huh?
Update to our assessment.
Update to our assessment to bring it into compliance with what's.
Can you send us an email to prompt us for comments on this plan along with
Absolutely.
a copy of this assessment so we can
Sure.
read through it and then make comments for you easily?
Sure. Would you like both?
Both what?
Both the Arvada assessment and
Sure.
the
Yes.
Dr. Cog assessment.
Copy
Okay,
both
sure.
on an email with
Alright.
a prompt. for
May have
us
to zip it,
respond.
but
All right.
thank you.
Anything else? Well done, Brady.
Here.